Okay, good afternoon. This is Andy Pedrezza with Special Effects Academy on our Forex Weekly Outlook for week starting June 3rd, 2018. We take a look at the week that ended and the week ahead. Our regular agenda, the currency strength meter, the fundamental announcements for the week, a look at the major pairs, the daily charts, any setups in progress, and a few parting words. Obviously, a Q&A at the end if anybody has any questions. We start out with our relative strength meter for the week starting June 3rd. We take a look at the week that just ended, week ending June the 1st, and the week prior. So we can see this was a reversal week. Most of the pairs did just about the opposite of what they'd done the week before. The Aussie continued appreciating against everybody except the pound and the Kiwi. The Canadian was around the middle of the pack. It gained on some, lost on others. The Swiss pretty much performed the same. The euro had a very good week against the dollar and the yen. It did drop against the other currencies. The pound was a clear winner. It gained on pretty much every pair out there, it's every currency out there, except for the New Zealand dollar. And if you look at the chart from the week prior, it's the exact opposite. The pound was the clear loser. So definitely we had a bit of a reversal for the week. The yen is the same. It depreciated against every other currency out there, the exact opposite of the week prior. The New Zealand dollar was one of the big winners. It made gains against everyone else. U.S. lost against everybody except the yen. And I have gold and silver, rather silver and gold there at the end, just because I like to keep my finger on the pulse. And we see that silver did depreciate against everybody, as pretty much did gold. Gold only gained against silver, but definitely not a week for anybody to be holding bullion. With that, we're going to move on into the fundamental announcements for this week, and it is a very light week as regards fundamental announcements. We have the Reserve Bank of Australia giving their interest rate decision on Tuesday, really Monday night. It will be a little bit after midnight for me on Monday night when that interest rate decision comes out. I don't expect anything to change, but since I'll be up anyway, I will be trading it. If anybody's interested, I'll probably be opening up the trading room to see if we can make some pips trading that fundamental. It will be at midnight Monday night into Tuesday morning. That would be, well, whatever time it is for you guys. It'll be 11:30 p.m. Central Time and 9:30 p.m. Pacific Time, if I'm not too mistaken. Actually, Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. my time, we have the gross domestic product from Australia as well, quarter over quarter. On Thursday morning, wee hours, 5 a.m. for me, we have the GDP year over year and quarter over quarter out of the Eurozone. And last but not least, on Friday, we have the equivalent of the non-farm payroll, but this time for Canada. And it is at the exact same time as the non-farm payroll would be. They usually do that a week after the U.S. does it. So 8:30 a.m. on Friday morning, the unemployment rate and the net change in employment out of Canada. That might be an interesting fundamental. And since I like those, I will be trading that one live. So definitely the Forex trading room will be open for business around 8 a.m. Friday morning, U.S. Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, with that, we're going to move into the charts. These are daily charts. This is the euro dollar. We can see here that we had that reversal. The week started off very nicely. That first day was a nice drop, and then the remainder, it just headed in the opposite direction. Bounced off of that trend line, which is a very old trend line coming from way back, and is now right there in the middle of two crossing trend lines. So not sure where that's going to take it. The week has just started. We're about an hour into the trading week now with the Asian market open. It's definitely too early to tell. It was most certainly a very bizarre week in that everything went a little bit backwards after the first day or the first couple of days. So we'll be taking a look at what's going on. I don't have a whole lot of opinions regarding the euro dollar. It's definitely at a major point of support resistance where it is right now, and it could very well go in either direction. So I'll wait for the market to tell me what it's going to be doing, and then I'll try to trade it as safely and as profitably as we can. The pound dollar, we see much the same. It hit the backside of a trend line and bounced right off of it. So the same drop at the beginning of the week, and then it started going backwards, ending the week much higher than where it had started out. Same as with the euro, no opinion here. I'll be waiting to see what the trading week starts giving us in the first couple of days. Definitely very interested in both the euro dollar and the pound dollar, as they tend to be pretty good movers. USDJPY, the yen, of course, is the safe haven currency for the Europeans primarily, and to some degree for the US as well. We saw that happening as the European troubles increased. The yen simply got stronger and stronger and stronger, and then last week it broke out of that and did a nice little retrace, about a third of a way back up to where it had been dropping. So as with the others, it's definitely at a very interesting junction there. And really, it's not so much what Japan is going to be doing that's going to influence the price of the USDJPY. Rather, it's what the rest of the world is going to be doing regarding currencies. If the European currencies continue to weaken, the yen will get stronger since it is their safe haven. If in fact we're in for a European euro and pound revival, then the USDJPY is probably going to be heading up. So this will be a very reactionary pair, and we'll have to keep a look on the an eye open for what the other currencies do to try to predict in any fashion what the USDJPY and the other JPY pairs are going to be doing. USD Canadian, I've been staying away from the Canadian for quite a few weeks now, other than quick in and out trades when I see something interesting happening, because it does tend to bounce around a lot. This is a daily chart, and you can see these very wild swings, and lately it's just been moving very sideways, still going up, hasn't gotten anywhere near its prior high, but it is still heading, following this trend line to a certain degree towards the top, but not giving any clear entries for anything. Well, now and then, but in general, not giving as clear of entry signals as the other pairs tend to do. I do think that we're in for a little bit of Canadian action, especially this week where we have that fundamental coming out on Friday. So I moved the CAD up again into my radar for this week. We'll see how that works out. And I guess that's about it for the USDCAD. USD Swiss, this was one of the more predictable pairs, and the only one that we actually took profit on last week was a couple of trades on the Swiss against, I think, the euro and against the dollar. I don't have that in front of me right now. But you can see that the Swiss did weaken from around the end of January, continued weakening all the way into April, and then recovered in May. It started heading into Swiss strength again. It's hitting that trend line. That's where it is right now. It did get some support there, and it started bouncing around a bit. We did manage to write it down pretty well at the same time as we had ridden it up prior. So I'll be keeping an eye on the Swiss pairs as well this week, especially looking for a break of that trend line. The Swiss is a currency that tends to swing very nicely between either channels or major points of support resistance. And now that it's made a trip all the way to the top, you can see that it has revisited that prior high from back in October. It seems now to want to go back towards the bottom. If it does, that is a huge amount of pips, and I'll be trying to take as many of them as I can, as will you. So there's a nice bit of potential if we do have a break of this trend line for it to go back to the top of the channel, inside the channel, bottom of the channel, even all the way back to the bottom of the chart, perhaps even deeper. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Definitely is a high on my my level of interest. The Aussie dollar, I keep expecting, and I still expect, an Aussie recovery. This currency has been punished drastically since the beginning of the year for no good reason at all. So I do expect it at some point to start heading back towards the top, at least hit the middle, and preferably even go all the way. But it just hasn't seemed to be cooperating. So it's still a bottom feeder. And I'll have to be very, very convinced, or it will have to be very convincing for me to start trading it back up. So keeping an eye on it, but not big on my radar. Kiwi dollar. The Kiwi dollar had a lot of political upset towards the beginning of the year, an upset election, a hung parliament, and a lot of other stuff that made it weaken significantly. Then it went sideways. Then, I'm sorry, this was the Kiwi getting stronger. And around here was all the mix-up with their elections, and that prompted the Kiwi to just crash to the bottom. It does seem to be staging a little bit of a recovery, but it is still too near the bottom. This is another one that I would like to trade back up to where it normally hangs out. It hangs out around the 75 area up here. Even if it doesn't make it all the way up, if it just goes to these prior levels of support resistance, it will still be giving us very nice opportunities. I would like it to break through this trend line, however, before I decide to do anything significant with it. So on my radar, not on my radar, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on it, but I don't expect it to move anytime soon. The Aussie Canadian, you've got two currencies that are very weird. The Aussie, as I mentioned before, has been weakening since the beginning of the year. However, the Canadian hasn't had a good run either. So it's like a battle of the underdogs here, where you don't know where they're going, which one is going to be weakening more against the other. It does look like the Aussie is recovering against the Canadian, which is what we see in this last bit of uptick here at the end in the last month or so. And we'll see if it has enough strength to start piercing through these levels of support resistance. Another one, like I said, I do think the Aussie is overdue for a correction into Australian strength, but I need to see a lot more indications of that before I'll take one of those trades. But if we can catch something like what happened back here, where it went all the way from the bottom to the top, even if that takes a few months to play out, this took about 2 months, maybe closer to 3. It's still a very interesting pair to trade, and it's got a lot of room to move back towards the top. So again, I'm going to keep an eye on the Canadian pairs as a matter of course this week, because I think something is going to start going on with them. And this may be one of the more interesting currency pairs based on the different fundamentals behind them. Euro Swiss, nothing much to say here that we haven't said. The euro has been weakening. The Swiss has been getting stronger. We can see that nice little drop, but last week was a reversal. The euro actually started getting stronger, and we see that slight uptick. It really hasn't broken any trend lines or anything like that, but definitely this week we saw a reversal on the euro Swiss, and it is now hanging out and has been hanging out for the last 3 or 4 trading days, just at that same level with a little bit of swings there, but basically ending up right where it started after the end of every trading day. Euro pound, nothing really to see here. It's a very sideways moving pair. Both the euro and the pound have been weakening, and pretty much at the same rate, which is why you don't see a whole lot of action. We saw the pound getting much, much stronger against the euro since back in September. Oops, sorry, I moved the chart when I didn't mean to. And since then, it has just been bouncing sideways. In general, the pound getting stronger, but not very decisively. It should still have room to go down a lot more if the pound hadn't pretty much hit a brick wall a couple of months back. So keeping an eye on this one, but not with a whole lot of passion. Okay, EURJPY. Again, nothing that we haven't said. The yen is the haven currency for the safe haven for the Europeans. As the euro got weaker, the yen got that much stronger, which is what we saw play out here. And last week, as I said, was a retracement or reversal of that trend. We'll see if it can continue or if indeed, as I suspect, it may start heading back towards the bottom. Euro Canadian, also a battle of the week. The euro was getting weaker all the time, the Canadian as well. However, the euro was weakening much faster, which is why the CAD gained against the euro. Last week, of course, you're a little bit of a retracement, not much, however. It's barely hit the underside of that trend line and may indeed just continue to follow it. Obviously, that's not a prediction, just reading the charts as I try to do every week. But the kicker will really be whatever the market ends up doing. So my bias is going to be to short this one. I'll be more likely to enter a short trade than a long one, but I will have to wait to see what the hourly charts do. Pound JPY, same thing as with Euro JPY. The pound got weaker and the JPY gained considerably, thanks to it being a safe haven for the UK as well as for Europe in general. We saw a little bit of a struggle back here, but then it completely collapsed. But last week was a major retracement. It gave back at least half of the pips it had given us in this drop here. So a little bit of an odd week for those two. Very interested to see what the pound JPY is going to be doing this week in the first couple of days. And then I will likely pick a direction and enter it, because this is a very nicely moving pair when it does decide to move. If it does go higher, I would dearly just love to trade it back to the top of the channel. But likely it's going to head down lower. As we see a little bit of the fears of all the uncertainty hit the Europeans once more. Of course, we have a lot of things going on in the world right now. We have the trade wars brewing between the U.S. and China, but not only the Chinese, but also Trump slapped some tariffs last week on Mexico, Canada, the EU on steel, and that is not making him any friends. So there's a lot of sword rattling or saber rattling rather, not in the sense of a war brewing, but a trade war, which is pretty much the equivalent, just fewer lives lost. So that's surely going to impact the dollar, surely going to impact the European currencies. The thing is, we don't know in which way, because it's not very clear if there is a trade war or they continue slapping sanctions and penalties on each other, who is going to come out on top. And the analysts don't seem to have a good idea of that either. And the Aussie JPY, the Aussie seems to be holding its own against the JPY. It bottomed out at some point here in March. Since then, it has been slowly trending higher, doing a lot of sideways at the same time, but it has not revisited the low, which is a good thing. This is another chart where I would very much like to trade it back towards this trend line or even higher. But I would need to see a good entry signal on the hourly or even on the daily, for that matter. I'd just like to see a little bit of decision out of the Aussie JPY. Euro New Zealand, another pair that's really not worth looking at a whole lot. Two weakening currencies, and it has been trading sideways for the better part of the last 6 months, actually more than 6 months now. We can say that it got into that sideways channel sometime in mid-October, and since then it has been bouncing ever decreasing waves within that channel. It only visited the top of the channel the one time. The rest, it has failed to even get that high. It's now at the bottom of the channel. Likely, we will have another trip towards somewhere around the middle, maybe a test of the underside of the trend line. So I'll be on the lookout for that as well, especially if the euro stages a little bit of a recovery. Even with the euro recovery last week, we see that the Kiwi held its own, and we really don't have a retracement on the Euro New Zealand. It just played sideways the entire week. I think that is it. No, we still have the pound Canadian. Pound Canadian, another one that has benefited from the woes that have plagued the pound. It is following this trend line on its way down. I think we've traded this one 2 or 3 times very nicely in the past few weeks. It did do a retracement, but not a deep one last week. And in general, very much sideways. So it looks like it's picking a direction. Keeping an eye on it, but I don't see a whole lot of opportunities on the pound Canadian based on what it's doing right now. If I can trade it safely down, if it continues following this trend line, I will. But this is another one that I'll need to be very convinced on an hourly chart that there is a movement in the works. That's going to be the end of my charts. I'm going to take a quick breather here. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, fair enough. Then these are the setups that I see in progress, and I don't see a lot of clarity. Last week was a little bit of a shock. We did see a lot of the pairs go into retracement or reversal mode, and that's always a time when you want to be very cautious and wait to see if it's a true reversal, if it's just regular retracement, if it's going to continue, if it's going to go back. So it just makes you stop and take a look at your surroundings. So that's what the beginning of this week is going to be. It's going to be a little bit of a cautious beginning till we see what the market is doing. In general, the USD pairs are still strong, and I will continue to try looking for dollar strength until at some point it ends. I've always said be ready for that reversal. That reversal may indeed have started happening last week, but it is too soon to tell. Euro pairs, as I mentioned, we had that a bit of a retracement last week beginning on the euro. This week will tell us whether it will continue or whether it was a fake out. The pound pairs pretty much the same. I still think there's shaky ground for the pound. It's not out of the woods just yet, but last week did give them a little bit of a breather. The Swiss pairs, they're battling it out nicely against all the major currencies. That's really good because we're overdue for a trip back towards the bottom of the Swiss charts into Swiss strength. I would love to trade those. So that's going to be very much on my radar. I'm not as uncertain about the Swiss as I am about the dollar, euro, and pound. But the majors are the majors, and they're the ones that are going to give us the most bang for our buck. Last but not least, as I mentioned throughout the charts, the CAD pairs. The loonie looks like it's poised to do something rather. Not sure exactly what, but I'm getting that bit of a gut feeling to keep an eye on it. It may be about to make a major move in either direction. I know that's a little bit wishy-washy and not technical at all, but you learn to read the market after a while, and it seems to me that the CAD may be about to do something. Except, as I said, I'm not sure what, but I'll be keeping a close eye on all the Canadian pairs. The parting words here, losing is good for the soul. We probably had the worst week last week that we've had this fiscal year. And definitely, like I said, it was a losing week. But even with that, the month still ended up nicely profitable. I've already sent the email out with the videos for the end of week review. We actually had 2 videos this week because I didn't manage to close out the trades by 3 p.m. on Friday. I waited till very close to the close of the market to get out, so I didn't have the deck ready. So I did sort of an interim close of the week, and I promised I would do a proper one later on. Promise kept. Both videos are in your email, as are the results for the week and the results for the month of May, which is now closed. This week will be the first week in June as regards our trading. A mentor once said to me, if you don't have losing periods, that tells me that you're being too cautious, and that is very true. You can only win if you put skin in the game, and the big wins come when you're definitely invested in your trades. If you stay out, well, you'll never lose, but you're never going to win either. And that mentor used to fire traders all the time who didn't have enough losses. Not to say that they were losing money on the account, but he wanted to see some losing weeks because it showed him that they were trying to get some of those big wins. If they were overly cautious, they really had no business working for him, was his approach. But that said, risk management overall. While I'm okay with losing, I'm not okay with losing too much. So know how much you can lose and don't put more skin into the game than you are willing to lose at any point in time. And that is it for me today. And as always, opening it up for any questions, comments, or anything from anyone, feel free to chime in.
Andy.
Yes, Miguel, how are you?
I'm good. It's it's about the website. It's not working. I'm not seeing the fundamental page loading in. Also the blog. I'm not sure what it is.
Well, thank you so much. I don't know what's happening, but I'll take a look as soon as we drop off.
Okay.
I don't have any device I can use right now until I log off of the of this webinar. But thank you for letting me know. I'll definitely take a look at it in the next few minutes. Is anybody else having that problem? Callum, can you get to the website?
Give me a couple of minutes and I'll have a look.
Okay. While you do that, does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, then on that note, I will call this a day. See you guys again tomorrow at noon will be our first session for the trading week. I don't necessarily expect us to be taking a whole lot of trades the first day, but you never know. So show up, I'll be there, and we'll figure it out together. Thank you very much, and I'll hang out a second till Callum confirms one way or another. But thank you, Miguel. Definitely appreciate that heads up.
No problem.
Okay, I'm getting into the website. Okay, getting into the blog.